Hello everyone, welcome back. Tom with Capo Fetish. Today on the channel we're going to talk about one of the most unique bands that ever came out of San Francisco. I'm talking about the Jefferson Airplane, formed in the mid-60s. We're going to talk and rank their 7 studio albums from 1966 through 1972. So without further ado, let's start it off here with number 7, and that is Long John Silver from 1972, their last album before they broke up and splintered into various incarnations. Hot Tuna. I think Hot Tuna was even happening before this album. And then eventually Jefferson Starship, and then unfortunately Starship. But this is their last album, and not a very, very strong album. I listened to it today. I have not listened to it in ages, and basically nothing on here really registers with me. There's not really anything in the way of a hook. It's just kind of meandering all the way along. I think the first track is probably my favorite, Long John Silver, the title track. Otherwise, none of it really registers with me. There's a track called Eat Starch Mom, which is the last track. That's okay. But I think the highlight of this album is probably the album packaging, the cover art. It's kind of a stash box. So I give them credit for this. This is an incredible little package going on here. Check this out. And then the album comes out. Album's in this cover, but you've got this little thing that you can form here, and look, there's the stash right there, right? So that's probably the most intriguing thing about this album is the cover art, the packaging. It is pretty unique, but it is coming last on the list at number 7, Long John Silver from 1972. Number 6 is from 1971, and it's the album called Bark. This is the first album without Marty Balin or drummer Spencer Dryden. We have new drummer Joey Covington, and we have an extra member named Papa John Creech on violin. Now, this isn't a completely disastrous affair. There are some really great cuts on here. They're few and far between, but there are a few amazing cuts. One being the single called "Pretty as You Feel," with lead vocals by Joey Covington, and of course Grace Slick harmonizing with Joey Covington. That is a really great track. It sounds like nothing in the Jefferson Airplane discography. I remember a guy across the street when I was young. He would play this album to death, and I remember that one stuck out to me the most. Pretty as You Feel, very eerie sounding. Really, again, sounds like nothing in their repertoire. Another great one is called, let me pull out this album here because the song titles are not on the album cover. Another one is, let's see here, Third Week in the Chelsea, written by guitarist Jorma Kaukonen. That's a really cool little folk ditty, little folk singer-songwriter tune. And then there's a track, the second to last track on side 2 called Funk is really bizarre, written by Joey Covington. It's this a cappella number, no instruments, just all these voices doing this really bizarre kind of harmony. And I think that was kind of interesting, just really strange, kind of unsettling in a way, in a good way. And I think probably the song that sounds the most like the classic Airplane on this album is the last track called War Movie, written by Paul Kantner. That's pretty cool. So it does end the album on a cool note. But overall, the album is pretty forgettable, except for about 3 or 4 songs. This came out in 71, and you could kind of tell that they were splintering at this point. And of course, by Long John Silver, it was pretty much over. So let's move on to number 5, shall we? This is the core. Actually, this is not the core yet. Number 5 is their first album, their debut. This doesn't feature Spencer Dryden. This features future Moby Grape guitarist and singer Skip Spence. He's on drums for most of these tracks on Takes Off. So at this point in their career, Jefferson Airplane is kind of like finding their sound. Marty Balin is pretty much the lead player in this band at this point. He writes most of the songs. He sings on most of the songs. You have original female vocalist Signe Anderson on this album, all over this album. Later, Grace Slick would replace her on the second album, Surrealistic Pillow. But there are some really fine tracks on here. Blues from an Airplane starts it off, really cool track. Pretty much, I would call this album kind of more of a folk rock album. You know, a mid-60s folk rock album. They're just trying to find their sound. Let Me In is another song. It's No Secret. I guess that was a single off this album. Nice little Marty Balin cut. You have a song called Let's Get Together, which is an early version of the song called Get Together, which Dino Valente would write. He was in the Quicksilver Messenger Service Band. But Let's Get Together would turn into Get Together for the Youngbloods in 1969. Huge hit for the Youngbloods. This is kind of an early version here, done by the Jefferson Airplane. And then you have some other tracks on here like Don't Slip Away, Chauffeur Blues. Nothing just, there's no really like super standouts on this record. It's a pleasant listen, but it's not really the core of who Jefferson Airplane became. You know, those classic albums. So for me, this is coming in at number 5 from 1966, Jefferson Airplane's Takes Off. Let's get to the core discography now, right? These 4 albums to me are the epitome of what Jefferson Airplane is, was, still is. Number 4 is Crown of Creation from 1968. This is a fine album. This is their 4th album in their discography. There's still a little bit of psychedelic left over from After Bathing at Baxter, their previous album from 67. There are some absolute standout tracks on here. One being the first track called Lather, written by Grace Slick, written about drummer Spencer Dryden, who turned 30. Really kind of childlike sounding, eerie. Just the way Grace Slick sings it is just fantastic. And by the way, Grace Slick, we'll get to her in a few moments, but she's just one of the most unsung singers of all time. We've got In Time, Triad, originally recorded by the Byrds for the Notorious Byrd Brothers album in 67, written by David Crosby. Deemed too risque, a song about menage a trois back in 1967. This was the first time it was released on this album, Crown of Creation, in 1968, with Grace Slick singing the song. And they do a fine version of it. It's really great. Acoustic kind of based, with Yorma playing the acoustic, and some just fabulous vocals by Grace Slick. I love the Byrds version too, though. It's now on the Notorious Byrd Brothers expanded CD with a couple of other cuts, a couple of other bonus cuts. But I love their version. I love the Byrds version. Other great songs on here. Share a Little Joke, a little Marty Ballin track. Pretty cool. Side 2 starts with... I can't even read this. Hold on one sec. Uno momento. Starts with If You Feel. The title track is one of Jefferson Airplane's greatest tracks. Crown of Creation. What an incredible track. I don't know if you've ever seen the clip on YouTube of them performing this. I think it's on the Jonathan Ross show or Jonathan Winter's show, where she's in blackface. Just really bizarre, but just an amazing, powerful track. Crown of Creation is. Those harmonies of Paul Kantner and Grace Slick would foreshadow the combination of Exene and John Doe years later in X, either indirectly or directly. I don't know, but when I first heard X, I thought Paul Kantner, Grace Slick, sounds just like them, but in more of a punk style. But yeah, great song, Crown of Creation. You've got Ice Cream Phoenix, another great Grace Slick tune. Greasy Heart, another great Grace Slick. And then it ends with a really powerful track called The House at Punil Corners. And there's a video online of them performing this on top of a New York building, high-rise. I think even before the Beatles did it in Let It Be, the Let It Be film. So I think they may have been the first ones to perform on top of a building with a crowd below looking above. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were the first before even the Beatles to do that. And they performed this just killer version of House of Punil Corners in that video. You should check it out. Number 3 is their breakout album. This is just an absolute landmark album. It's probably their most consistent album. Made them superstars in 1967, released in early 67 in February. Surrealistic Pillow for me comes at number 3. There's really not a bad track on this whole album. You have 2 songs brought over from Grace Slick's previous band called The Great Society, Somebody to Love and White Rabbit, both huge singles in 1967. And by the way, Somebody to Love, I mean, that is one of the greatest rock vocals I have ever heard. I mean, Grace Slick's voice just cuts through that track. To this day, it just sounds so amazing. No matter how many times you've heard it, right? It's such a powerful vocal on Somebody to Love. Starts off with She Has Funny Cars, great lead-off track, and then, of course, Somebody to Love. Then you have My Best Friend, great little catchy track, kind of reminds me of the Mamas and Papas. Then you have a beautiful ballad track called Today, which they performed at the Monterey Pop Festival, but the camera kept focusing on Grace Slick. They didn't even focus one bit on Marty Ballin, and he was the one singing it. They just focused on Grace Slick's beauty and her playing like this keyboard. So side one ends with Coming Back to Me, another beautiful Marty Balin track. Side two starts with three-fifths of a mile in 10 seconds. And the second track on Cerulean Pillow, side two, could be in my top 3 all-time Jefferson Airplane songs, a song called DCBA 25. God, what a great track that is. I love that track. I've always loved that track. It has this kind of birdsy, chimey feel to it. And the way that Grace Slick's and Paul Kantner's vocals overlap on it at the kind of at the conclusion of the chorus every time. Just amazing. Love that track. How Do You Feel is a great little ballad that follows that. Then of course, you have the incredible instrumental by Jorma called Embryonic Journey. The guy, let's talk about Jorma for a second, right? The guy is so underrated. I think he has one of the most unique styles of playing. He's really just amazing with the wah-wah pedal, and just he's very tasteful too at the same time. He's an amazing acoustic player. Everything he does in the airplane is done with taste. There's just so much emotion in his playing, and it's just whatever he's using, the effects he's using in these songs on his whatever effects box or whatever. It's always just so like unique and original. It just kind of sucks you in. It's fantastic. So after Embryonic Journey, you have the classic White Rabbit, timeless, and then it ends with Plastic Fantastic Lover. This is probably their most consistent album. Not my favorite, pretty close to it, but there are 2 others that I love even more, okay? Number 2 is 1969's Volunteers. I will listen to this again today. This is a near perfect album. No psychedelia on this album. They're coming back to earth for this album. Very heavily political, this album. Starts off with one of their great lead-off tracks, We Can Be Together, Up Against the Wall, Motherfucker. Some of the stations had to censor the song. I think even the single edition, they had to mix that down a little bit. I love Good Shepherd. Speaking of Jorma, I love his guitar work on this track, especially in that midsection where it's descending, those descending chords. Down, 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 down. Fantastic. Love the song The Farm, a nice little ditty about living on a farm, kind of acoustic, really fun sing-along track. An epic Grace Slick song follows that, ending side one called Hey Frederick, showcasing one of her best vocals. Just incredible track. Side two starts with a nice little tune called Turn My Life Down. And then they break into Wooden Ships, the second track. Now, I have always loved the song Wooden Ships. I like the CSN version, but there's something about Jefferson Airplane's version that is so infectious. You know, it starts off with the piano, and then that midsection when all the harmonies are going on, and there's a lot of highs and lows and just dynamics. I love their version of Wooden Ships. Eskimo Blue Day, a great song about ecology, saving the planet. She says her famous line in there, what is it? The human name doesn't mean shit to a tree. You know, a lot of profanity on this album from '69, from Volunteers. Then you've got a Song for All Seasons, some weird little 1-minute track called Meadowlands, and then it ends with the absolute iconic Volunteers. This is a near perfect record, one of my favorite Jefferson Airplane albums. I just absolutely love this album. Probably their most down-to-earth record. It's completely kind of obsolete of any kind of psychedelia. Fantastic. But my number one is 1967's After Bathing at Baxter's. I think, to me, this is one of the greatest psychedelic albums of all time. It may not be completely consistent, but man, the highlights on this album are some of their greatest moments. Starting off with the Ballad of Me and You and Punil. Incredible track. And all the way through, there's just absolute amazing highlights on here. Martha. Incredible little moody, folky ditty from Paul Kantner and Grace Slick, beautifully sung by Grace. Wild Time is a great rocker. You've got Rejoice, another Grace Slick showcase. Side two, you've got, let's pull out the record here, right? Sometimes they make it impossible for you to check out the song list on some of these albums, right? Let me put the glasses on. Okay, so let's see. We've got The Ballad of You and Me and Punil. Young Girl Sunday Blues, amazing. Martha, which we talked about. I love The Wall of the Castle. That's a great track. And then on side 2, you've got Watch Your Ride by Kantner. Spare Change is an instrumental. It goes on just a tad long. Sometimes I skip it, sometimes I play it. You've got Two Heads, one of Grace Slick's greatest tracks, just so like sinister sounding and dark. Great psychedelic song. And then it ends with Saturday Afternoon. Won't You Try Saturday Afternoon? What a great way to end an album. A song about the Gathering of the Tribes Festival in Golden Gate Park in 1967 with Allen Ginsberg and Timothy Leary, and the Dead were there. All illustrated here in this song. There's one other track I really like on here that Jorma sings, and that is, let's see, I think it is The Last Wall of the Castle. I believe that's it. That's what it is. Yeah, I mean, this is just a fantastic record. Like I said, it may not be perfect all the way through, but the highlights, I think, are some of the greatest Jefferson Airplane songs ever. So that's my number one. After Bathing at Baxter's, they had 2 albums in '67. Early in the year, they had Surrealistic Pillow. Later in the year, they had After Bathing at Baxter's. So when it comes to live albums for the Jefferson Airplane, you can't really go wrong with Bless Its Pointed Little Head from '69. This was released between the albums Crown of Creation and Volunteers. There's some definite highlights on this album. One being the song called Fat Angel, written by Donovan. They do a great live version on here. They do a cover of The Other Side of This Life, which was in their set early on. I think they even did that song at Monterey Pop. There's another live album here from the Fillmore East from '69, which I really dig. This is when they were supporting the Volunteers album. And I think this is one of the best I've ever heard of the Jefferson Airplane live. They're just on fire, cooking on this album here. And then a song I love so much that was never featured on any of the Jefferson Airplane albums. It was a standalone single released between the albums Volunteers and Bark. It's just a standalone single called Mexico. I've mentioned it before in a previous video. The song is under 2 minutes, written by Grace Slick, one of her best vocals. Just a fantastic track. And the flip side is a really cool Paul Kantner song called Have You Seen the Saucers? And both these songs are featured on this really killer compilation that was released in the 80s called 2400 Fulton Street. That's where they all lived in San Francisco. I think this is the best compilation I've ever heard from Jefferson Airplane. It hits all the fine points from all their albums from 66 to 72, and it's broken into themes. Like disc 1 is the beginnings, and then disc 2 is all the psychedelia, all the psychedelic songs, and then the revolutionary songs on disc 3. Disc 4 has the, it's called Airplane Parts. So it's just really well curated. I don't think it's available anymore. I bought it years ago. I probably had this since the mid-90s. But if you could find it, it's really, really a fabulous compilation that really nails all the finer points of Jefferson Airplane's discography. So there you go, folks. Those are my favorite Jefferson Airplane albums. What are your favorite albums of Jefferson Airplane? Put them in the comments section. As always, thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed and you dig the content, just press that subscribe button. And we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.